Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are going to talk about a very specific, very human kind of madness. You know that feeling when you decide to change your life? That rush of adrenaline when you say, okay, starting Monday, no more junk food?
Whoa!
Or starting tomorrow, I'm going to write that novel.
The moment of resolve, it's intoxicating, isn't it?
Exactly. It feels better than actually doing the thing. And today, we're looking at a man who got so addicted to that feeling, the thrill of the last one, that he built his entire life and literature around it.
It's incredible.
We're talking about a guy who spent decades planning to quit smoking, writing dates on the walls, celebrating the last cigarette over and over again, just so he could feel the pleasure of restarting.
And the irony, of course, is that this wasn't just a personal quirk. It was the engine that drove one of the most important and I think accidental literary careers of the 20th century.
We are diving into the life of a man born Aron Hector Schmitz, who the world eventually came to know as Italo Svevo.
A name most people probably haven't heard.
Exactly. And if you're listening to this and thinking, I've never heard of him, that is actually part of the story. For most of his life, nobody else had either. We're looking at a failed writer who spent the prime of his life selling, of all things, underwater paint for warships.
Which is not the typical biography of a literary genius.
Yeah.
Usually we hear about the starving artist in the garret or the professor or the journalist. We rarely hear about the industrial paint salesman.
Not at all. But the sources we have today, biographies, literary analysis, and specifically his masterpiece, Zeno's Conscience, tell a story of how this paint salesman ended up really inventing the modern psychological novel.
He absolutely did.
And the craziest part, he likely would have died completely unknown if he hadn't hired a random English tutor in Trieste who just happened to be a young, broke James Joyce.
It's one of those history-altering coincidences that you just can't make up. It sounds like fiction.
It really does.
So our mission today is to unpack this. We want to understand how a man who considered himself a failure, a totally inept figure, as he would say, managed to pioneer the use of Freudian theory in fiction before it was even really accepted in Italy.
Right.
We're going to look at the psychology of the unreliable narrator, and ultimately we're going to see what this man of smoke can teach us about our own addictions to self-improvement.
So let's get into the context.
Yeah.
Because you can't understand Svevo without understanding where he was standing. Trieste.
Right. So today, if you look at a map, Trieste is in Italy. It's right there in the northeast corner, kind of tucked away.
Mm-hmm.
But in 1861, when our subject was born, the map looked very, very different. Trieste was the jewel of the Austrian Empire.
So we're talking about the Habsburgs.
Exactly. Later, Austria-Hungary. It was the empire's main outlet to the sea, its biggest, most important port. So imagine a city that isn't quite Italian, isn't quite German, isn't quite Slavic.
It's everything at once.
It's this massive, bustling commercial hub. You have coffee traders, insurance magnates, naval officers from all over the world. It's a melting pot in the truest sense of the word.
It sounds like a place where identity would be slippery.
Slippery is the perfect word. It was a liminal space. You had the rigid bureaucracy of Vienna, all in German, trying to manage a population that was culturally Mediterranean Italian-speaking. And Aron Hector Schmitz, our future Italo Svevo, is born right into the middle of this identity crisis.
He is the crisis personified. I mean, let's look at his family. He's born into a Jewish family, right?
A secular Jewish family, yes.
And his father is a German-speaking businessman. His mother is Italian. So right there at the dinner table, you have this clash of cultures.
And strictly speaking, it wasn't just a clash, it was a hierarchy. In the Austrian Empire, German was the language of power. It was the language of commerce, of the law, of getting ahead.
And Italian.
Italian was the language of the streets in Trieste, but it wasn't even standard Italian, the proper literary Italian.
I read that he didn't even speak proper Italian growing up. That seems wild for someone who becomes a famous Italian writer.
That's a crucial point that many people miss. His first language, the language of his heart and his home, was the Triestine dialect.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Venetian dialect, very specific to that region. It has its own rhythm, its own vocabulary,
Okay.
standard literary Italian. The language of Dante and Petrarch, the language of the Academy, was actually his second language. He had to learn it, almost like a foreign tongue.
Oh.
And then, on top of that, because his father was of German heritage and wanted his sons to be successful in the Austrian Empire,
He sends them away?
he sent Aron and his brothers away to boarding school. in Germany.
So he's completely immersed.
Completely, near Würzburg. So from the age of 12, he is immersed in German. He's reading Goethe, Schiller, Schopenhauer in the original German. He's reading Shakespeare in German translation. He's reading the Russian classics. So by the time he comes back to Trieste, he's this total cultural hybrid.
A lot of layers.
He's Jewish, but secular. He's Italian by birth, but German by education. And he's living in an Austrian port city.
It sounds like he didn't have a solid ground to stand on. Like if someone asked him, "What are you?"
Yeah.
The answer would take 5 minutes to explain.
Which is exactly why he later chose the pseudonym Italo Svevo. It wasn't just a catchy name, it was a map of his psyche.
Break that down.
Italo obviously means Italian. Svevo refers to Swabian, which is a historical region of Germany. So literally he called himself Italis the Swabian.
That feels almost contradictory, like calling yourself the French Englishman or something.
It was a contradiction,
Yeah.
and it was a statement. But in the late 19th century, that was a dangerous thing to be. Nationalism was on the rise everywhere. People wanted you to pick a side. Are you Italian? Are you Austrian?
And he's saying,
And here comes this guy saying, I am the hyphen. I am both. He was signaling that he was a bridge between these cultures, but for a long time, being a bridge just meant everyone walked all over you.
So he comes back to Trieste in 1880. He's young, he's incredibly well-read, he has this head full of European literature, he wants to be a writer. He probably envisions a life of, leisure, writing plays, living off his father's money.
That was absolutely the plan. His father had a successful glassware business. Aaron probably thought he was set for life. He could be a gentleman scholar, dabble in the arts, maybe publish a few poems. But then the reality of 19th century capitalism hit hard.
The crash.
His father's business collapsed. It went bankrupt. And purely from a practical standpoint, the man of leisure dream just evaporates instantly.
All gone.
The young intellectual who just wants to read Hamlet and write stories now has to go out and get a job to support the family.
And he doesn't get a job in a library or a university where he could maybe use his brain in a creative way?
Oh, no, nothing like that. He gets a job at the Union Bank of Vienna as a correspondence clerk.
That is a soul-crushing pivot from literature to ledgers.
And he stayed there for 20 years.
20 years. I want to pause on that because we often hear stories of writers who struggle for a year or two. Maybe they wait tables or drive a cab. But 20 years of sitting behind a counter, processing transactions, writing business letters in French and German, that has to do something to a person's mind.
It did. It created this deep sense of alienation. He referred to those hours at the bank as time subtracted from life. He felt like a cog in a machine, but, and this is the key insight for us, that drudgery is what gave his writing its unique flavor.
How so?
He wasn't writing about heroic knights or sweeping romances. He began to write about the grayness of modern life, the bureaucracy, the feeling of being trapped in a system you can't control, the small, private humiliations of an office job.
It reminds me of Franz Kafka, working at the Insurance Institute.
The comparison is very, very apt. They were both subjects of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, both Jewish, both trapped in bureaucratic jobs they hated, and both writing about the absurdity of systems. They were contemporaries, wrestling with the same modern condition.
So he was writing in secret during this time, hiding it from his colleagues.
He was leading a complete double life. By day, the respectable, punctual bank clerk, Aron Schmitz. By night, or perhaps hiding manuscripts under the ledger when the boss wasn't looking, he was writing novels.
And he was politically active, too, right?
Yes, and this is another fascinating contradiction. He was contributing articles to a socialist newspaper called L'Indépendant, a banker writing for a socialist paper. It just shows how fragmented his life was.
Okay, so let's talk about those early attempts, because often when we tell these stories, we skip to the success. But the failure here is really, really important. He publishes his first novel, Una Vita, which means a life, in 1892.
And he paid to have it published. That's an important detail. No publisher was breaking down his door. He believed in it enough to finance it himself, which is a huge financial risk for a bank clerk.
Ouch. And the reception? What did the critics say?
Nothing. Absolute crushing silence. He was completely ignored. It didn't even get bad reviews. It just got no reviews. It was like shouting into a void. It just vanished.
That might be worse than a bad review.
It's much worse. At least a bad review means someone read it, someone engaged with it. Silence is just indifference.
Okay, but he persists.
Yeah.
He doesn't give up yet. He writes another one, Senilità, published in 1898.
Senilità, which is usually translated as senility, or more accurately, as a man grows older. He poured his heart into this one. It's a much more focused, psychologically dense book. He thought, this is it. This is the one that proves I'm a writer.
It's a melancholy story, right? About a man who kind of fails in love and life.
Very much so. It's about self-deception, about a man who creates these romantic fantasies and then is crushed when reality doesn't match up. It's a very Svevo book.
What was the verdict on this one?
It was a disaster. But this time it was worse than silence. The critics who did bother to read it hated it. And do you know what they attacked?
Let me guess. The plot. The depressing characters.
They attacked his language. They mocked his Italian.
Yeah.
Yes. Remember, Italian was his second language, and his professional life was in German. The critics said his style was commercial, uncultured, barbaric. They said it was full of business jargon and German-influenced sentence structures.
So they didn't see it as a new style. They saw it as incorrect.
They saw it as incompetence. It wasn't the flowery, poetic Italian that was popular at the time, the style of a writer like D'Annunzio. Svevo's style was dry, analytical, almost clinical, and they just savaged him for it.
That criticism must have stung. It's not just your story is bad, it's you don't even know how to speak our language. It attacks his very identity.
It destroyed him. It confirmed his deepest insecurity, that he was an outsider, an imposter. After Senilitov flopped so spectacularly, Svevo made a dramatic decision.
He gives up.
He formally renounced literature. He wrote in his diary that writing was a ridiculous and harmful thing. He decided that he was not a writer, that he had been deluding himself for years.
He quit.
He quit. He entered a period of literary silence that lasted for over 2 decades. He buried Italo Svevo and became just Aron Schmitz, the businessman.
And his life took a massive turn around this time, right? He got married.
Yes. In 1896, right before Senilita came out, he married his cousin, Livia Veneziani.
His cousin.
It was the 19th century. These things happened, especially within tight-knit bourgeois communities. But Livia wasn't just his cousin. She was his ticket out of the bank.
Because her family was wealthy.
Very wealthy. The Veneziani family were industrialists. They were big players in Trieste.
There is an interesting detail in the notes about his religion here. Svevo was Jewish, Livia was Catholic.
Right. And Livia, a devout Catholic, perhaps concerned about social standing or maybe due to a difficult pregnancy where she wanted spiritual protection, convinced him to convert.
Yeah.
So purely for pragmatic reasons, he converts to Catholicism.
But he didn't actually believe it.
Not for a second. He remained a staunch atheist privately. But this is another layer of the mask, isn't it? He's acting the part of the good Catholic husband. He's acting the part of the banker. He's acting the part of the non-writer. He is a man composed entirely of performances.
He's wearing a costume of normal bourgeois gentleman.
Perfectly put. And then he joins the in-laws business. And this isn't just any business. This is the detail that I find so fascinatingly specific. They made underwater paint.
Specifically, anti-fouling paint for ships.
Right, and anti-fouling composition for the hulls of naval warships.
Anti-fouling. That means keeping barnacles and seaweed off.
Exactly. You have to understand the context. This was the era of the great naval arms race before World War I. Every navy in Europe, the British Royal Navy, the German Kaiserliche Marine, the Italians, the Austrians, they were all building massive steel dreadnoughts.
Barnacles are bad for business.
Barnacles are a military disaster. If they grow on the hull, it creates drag. It slows the ship down and massively increases fuel consumption. The Veneziani family had a secret formula, a special toxic paint, that prevented this. It was a very lucrative, very important military technology.
So the failed poet, the socialist writer, becomes a merchant of war paint.
And he was good at it. That's the funny part. He didn't fail at business. He became a very successful industrialist. He traveled to France, to Germany, negotiating contracts with admirals and businessmen. He became the boss. He was wealthy, respected, and completely, utterly dead inside regarding his art.
This job eventually takes him to London, doesn't it?
Yes. The business was expanding. The British Royal Navy was the biggest client in the world, so the company set up a factory in Charlton, in southeast London. And Svevo lived there for a while to oversee operations.
There's a blue plaque there now.
There is, at 67 Charlton Church Lane. It's amazing to think of him there.
I love the image of this neurotic, intellectual, middle-aged Italian man wandering around Edwardian London.
He hated it. We have letters he wrote back to Livia. He complained about everything. The food, the weather, the constant fog. He complained about the reserve of the English people. He found them cold and unapproachable.
A total fish out of water.
Completely.
Yeah.
He was a man of the Mediterranean cafe culture, a man who loved to sit and talk for hours, stuck in the smog of industrial London where everyone was so proper.
But this business expansion, this need to deal with the British, is what leads to the miracle. He needs to speak better English to sell the paint.
Correct. He's back in Trieste in 1907. He's doing more and more business with the British Admiralty, and he realizes his English is clunky. It's functional, but not fluent. He needs a private tutor. So he goes to the Berlitz School in Trieste and asks for one.
And who walks in the door?
A 25-year-old impoverished Irishman, disheveled, probably hungover, wearing these thick glasses, a young man named James Joyce.
This is the part of the story that feels scripted. It's unbelievable. You have a middle-aged paint merchant, wealthy, respectable, wearing a suit, and this young, unknown genius in waiting, sitting in a room, conjugating English verbs.
And Joyce was not a great man yet. That's vital to remember. In 1907, he was struggling, he was drinking too much, he was constantly broke, borrowing money from everyone. He was working on Dubliners and a portrait of the artist as a young man. But he was essentially a nobody in Trieste. He was just the English teacher.
But they must have clicked. It wasn't just about grammar.
They bonded immediately. They bonded over being outsiders. Joyce was an Irishman in exile who hated the Catholic Church and the provincialism of Ireland. Svevo was a Triestine Jew turned atheist who felt alienated from both Italian and Austrian culture.
So they were both rebels in their own way.
And they both had this dark, ironic sense of humor. They were both obsessed with literature. The lessons quickly became less about English and more about talking about Ibsen and Flaubert and philosophy.
And eventually the secret comes out. The secret that this businessman used to be a writer.
Svevo must have been terrified. Imagine this. He respects Joyce's intellect immensely. He sees this young man as a true genius. And finally, one day, he works up the courage to say, you know, I used to write. I published these 2 old novels years ago. They're gathering dust. Would you mind taking a look?
He probably expected Joyce to laugh at him or to give him a polite, oh, that's nice, and then just throw him in the trash.
Instead, Joyce took the books, read Una Vita and Senolita, and was absolutely blown away. He came back to the next lesson and told Svevo, do you know that you are a neglected writer? There are passages in Senolita that even Anatole France could not have written.
Wow. Anatole France was a Nobel Prize winner. That's high praise.
It was the highest praise. And that validation, I can't even imagine what that felt like after 20 years of silence and failure. To have this brilliant young man tell you that you were great all along.
It must have been like a resurrection.
It was the spark. Joyce didn't just teach him English. He resurrected Italo Svevo. He validated the very things the Italian critics had hated. The critics hated the dryness, the lack of poetry, the focus on internal psychology. Joyce saw that Svevo wasn't bad at being traditional. He was good at being modern.
He saw the future in it.
He saw the future of the novel in those failed books. He recognized a kindred spirit.
And the influence went both ways.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Joyce got something out of this friendship, too.
Something huge. At this time, Joyce was outlining his great project, Ulysses. He needed a protagonist, but not a hero in the traditional sense. He needed a middle-aged, Jewish, slightly neurotic, kind-hearted, intellectually curious everyman.
Leopold Bloom.
Leopold Bloom is largely based on Italo Svevo.
Really?
Absolutely. The way Bloom thinks, his curiosity about science, his domestic struggles, his specific brand of ironic humor, his outsider status, that's the paint merchant from Trieste. So even if Svevo never wrote another word, he would be immortalized as the DNA of Leopold Bloom, one of the most important characters in all of literature.
That is wild to think about. One of the most famous characters in English literature is actually a portrait of this obscure Italian businessman who sold ship paint.
It creates this beautiful symmetry, doesn't it? They helped each other become immortal.
So Joyce lights the fire, but it's not like he immediately runs off to write. History intervenes again. World War I happens.
Right. And for a paint manufacturer in a major naval port, war is complicated. The city of Trieste is a battleground of loyalties. The factory gets shut down by the Austrian authorities. The Venezianis are seen as pro-Italian. The Italians see them as Austrians. Svevo finds himself in this strange limbo. The business stops, and suddenly, after decades of being too busy, he has time.
He has nothing but time.
He's stuck at home. He starts translating Freud's work on dreams. He gets deeply into psychoanalysis. And with Joyce's encouragement still ringing in his ears, he starts writing again.
And this time it's different.
It's 1919. He's almost 60 years old. And he begins his masterpiece, La coscienza di Zeno, Zeno's conscience. This book is the one. It is the masterpiece. And it is completely different from anything else being written at the time, especially in Italy. He abandons the traditional third-person storytelling of his early failures. He adopts a first-person perspective. But it's not just a diary.
It's a medical document. Or it pretends to be.
Right. The framing device is just fantastic. The book opens with a preface written not by the author, Svevo, but by a psychoanalyst who calls himself Dr. S.
Dr. S is in Sigmund, or Svevo.
A little nod to both, probably. And the doctor says, I am publishing these memoirs of my patient Zeno Cossini out of revenge because he abruptly quit his therapy and stopped paying me.
That sets the tone perfectly. It's petty, it's funny, it's malicious.
It immediately frames the entire book as an act of hostility and, most importantly, unreliability. We are told from page 1 that we cannot trust what we are about to read. We are reading the private thoughts of a man who is trying to lie to his doctor and therefore to himself and to us.
And this is where the deep dive really needs to focus.
Yeah.
Because Zeno's conscience isn't just a funny story. It's a breakdown of the modern human mind. The main character, Zeno Cossini, is rich, he's idle, and he is obsessed with his own health and his own morals.
He is the archetype of the inetto, the inept one. This is a concept Svevo developed throughout his work. The inept one is incapable of living life directly. He can only analyze it. He hesitates. He doubts. He overthinks everything.
He's paralyzed by his own consciousness.
Exactly. And his biggest struggle, the thread that runs through the entire book, is his addiction to smoking.
The ultima cigaretta. The last cigarette.
Zeno goes to the doctor specifically to cure his nicotine addiction. That's the stated goal of the therapy. But as he explains his habit, we realize that smoking isn't the problem. The quitting is the problem.
Break down the mechanism for us. Because in the source material, there's this fascinating paradox about why he smokes the last one.
Okay, so Zeno explains that the most enjoyable cigarette is never the first one of the day. It's always the last cigarette. Why? Because when you smoke, what you decide is the last one, you are making a profound promise to yourself.
This is it. New me starts now.
After this, I will be a new man. I will be strong, healthy, disciplined. That moment of resolve gives him a massive dopamine hit. He feels virtuous. He feels powerful.
Feels like he's conquered himself without actually doing anything.
Exactly. He gets the reward of being a good person just by making the decision. But then, once you finish that cigarette, the drama is over. The thrill of becoming is gone. You are just being a non-smoker. And Zeno can't stand being. He needs to be becoming.
So to get that feeling of virtuous resolution back.
He has to smoke again. He has to fail. He lights up the 10 a.m. cigarette so that the 11 a.m. cigarette can be the glorious last one again. It creates a perpetual loop of sin and repentance.
It's a self-sustaining addiction to virtue.
That's a brilliant way to put it. He writes dates on the walls of his bedroom, in his office. 4th of June, 1905, last cigarette. 5th of June, 1905, really the last cigarette. 7th of June, last cigarette important. The book is filled with these entries.
It's so relatable it hurts. It's the diet that starts on Monday. It's the gym membership we buy in January and use twice.
It is. Svevo, writing in 1919, identified that modern man is addicted to the potential of the future. We sacrifice the present moment because we are obsessed with the better version of ourselves that is always just around the corner. Zeno smokes to keep that better version alive as a fantasy rather than doing the hard work of actually changing.
And throughout the book, he applies this same logic, this same ineptitude to everything. His marriage, his business, his affairs.
Yes. The marriage plot is hilarious and so telling. He decides he wants to marry into this respectable family, Malfentis. He starts courting the most beautiful daughter, Ada. She's serious and intelligent. She rejects him brutally.
Okay, plan B.
He immediately proposes to her younger sister, Alberta, who is an aspiring writer. She just laughs at him. So, in a single evening, humiliated and desperate, he ends up proposing to the third sister, Augusta.
Augusta is.
The one no one else wants. Zeno finds her ugly, she's cross-eyed, she's boring. He proposes to her out of a kind of pity and self-loathing. It's a total disaster.
That sounds tragic.
But here is the brilliance of the book. Augusta turns out to be the perfect wife for him. She is grounded, healthy, practical, loving, and Zeno ends up having a surprisingly happy life almost by accident. He drifts into happiness while trying to sabotage himself.
So it's not a tragedy of failure, it's a comedy of accidental success.
That's the core of it. The book seems to be arguing that being inept, being a bit of a screw-up, might actually be a survival strategy in a chaotic world.
What do you mean by that?
Remember, this is written right after World War I, where the strong and decisive and healthy men of Europe led the continent into a slaughterhouse. Zeno is sick, neurotic, indecisive. But the people in the book who are rigid, the people who think they have it all figured out, they break. Zeno, who is flexible, who lies to himself, who drifts, he survives. He is like a cork bobbing on the ocean of life. He's a survivor because he doesn't resist.
So the book comes out in 1923. Svevo is 61 years old. He has channeled Freud. He has channeled his own life. He has written an undeniable masterpiece. He put everything into this.
Channel nothing. Crickets.
You have to be kidding me. Again.
Yeah.
After all that.
Again. The Italian literary establishment completely ignored it. They didn't get the joke. They didn't understand the psychoanalysis Freud was still looked at with deep suspicion in Catholic Italy. They thought the book was rambling, unstructured, and, once again, poorly written.
That is heartbreaking. He must have thought, well, the universe just doesn't want me to be a writer. That's 3 strikes.
Yes. He was ready to give up again. He was resigned to his fate as the paint salesman who wrote a weird book. But he had one last card to play. He realized he had one connection left in the literary world.
His old student.
He sent a copy of the book to Paris, to his old English tutor.
Joyce.
By 1923, James Joyce was arguably the most famous and infamous writer in the world. Ulysses had been published the year before. He was the toast of literary Paris. So Joyce receives this book from his old friend in Trieste, and he goes to work.
What did he do? Just tell people about it.
He became a one-man PR machine. He started telling all the influential French critics, people like Valéry Larbaud and Benjamin Cremieux, you have to read this book. This is a genius. He basically forced them to pay attention. He championed it, and he helped it translated into French.
And the French reaction was different.
Night and day. The French critics, who were already into Proust and psychoanalysis and the stream of consciousness, they hailed it as a miracle. They got it. They called it the Italian comedic masterpiece. They compared him to Charlie Chaplin and Marcel Proust. They saw the genius of the introspection and the unreliability.
And I assume once Paris loved it, Italy suddenly changed its tune.
That is exactly how it works in the art world, isn't it? It's called the Svevo case, the caso Svevo. Suddenly, the Italian critics, led by the very influential poet Eugenio Montale, were like, oh yes, we knew he was great all along, a hidden master.
They were shamed into recognizing him.
Totally. If Paris says it's good, it must be good. So suddenly, at the age of 65, Svevo was famous.
So he finally gets his moment. He travels to Paris. He's celebrated at dinners. People are calling him a genius.
He enjoyed a few years of incredible celebrity. He finally merged the two halves of his life. The businessman and the writer were one person. He was affectionately known as the grand old man of Italian literature. It's a wonderful late-in-life success story.
But we have to talk about the end, because for a man whose work was all about the irony of death and the last cigarette, his actual death is almost too perfect, too literary.
It is the final chapter of the novel, really. It's 1928. He's working on a 4th novel, a sequel to Zeno. He's driving back to Trieste with his wife and grandson.
And there's a car crash.
A bad one. He was injured severely, a broken femur. He is taken to a hospital in a small town called Motta di Lavenza. His health deteriorates rapidly. His old man's heart can't take the shock.
He knows he's dying.
He's lying there. He's in pain, struggling to breathe. And he realizes he's dying. And he makes one last request.
He asks his nephew for a cigarette.
Yes. A visitor, his nephew, is by his bedside, and he whispers, a cigarette.
And the nephew.
The nephew, trying to be responsible, says, no, uncle, it will be bad for your heart. The doctor says no.
Denied.
And Svevo looks at him with that typical wry, ironic smile and whispers his last words, that would have been my last. And then he dies.
It gives me chills. He was denied the final ritual, the ultima cigaretta.
It is the supreme irony. The man who spent 50 years celebrating the last cigarette as a concept never actually got to smoke the real one. He died with the desire still unfulfilled.
Which is, in a way, the most Zeno way to go.
Absolutely. It fits his philosophy perfectly. Life is incomplete. Life is about desire, not fulfillment. We are always interrupted before the final act.
I want to zoom out a bit and look at his legacy, because today he's a giant in Italy. There are statues of him, schools named after him. But there's another aspect of his life we haven't touched on much, his politics. We said he was a socialist, but he was also a wealthy industrialist. How do you reconcile that?
It's another one of the great Svevo contradictions. While he was managing the paint factory and becoming rich, he was still a Marxist at heart. But his socialism was less about violent revolution and more about a kind of humanistic pacifism.
He'd seen war up close.
He saw World War I destroy his city. Trieste was shattered by it. He saw the absurdity of nationalism, of Italians and Austrians killing each other. So his political thinking became about how to prevent that from ever happening again.
The notes mentioned he had a very specific idea about Europe's future.
Yes, and this is incredibly forward-thinking. Long before the European Union was even a dream, Svevo argued that the only way to stop the fighting was economic integration. He advocated for a United States of Europe.
A common market.
He believed that if nations traded with each other, shared currencies, and became economically interdependent, they wouldn't bomb each other. It was a banker solution to a human problem, but it was incredibly prescient for the 1920s.
It seems like he was always ahead of his time. He was doing Freudian fiction before the Italians knew who Freud was. He was talking about a European Union before the EU. He was writing about alienation and the fragmented self before the existentialists made it cool.
He was a man out of time, and I think that's why he resonates so much today. When you read Zeno's Conscience now, it doesn't feel like a 100-year-old book at all. Zeno feels like a modern neurotic. He feels like us.
He feels like me at 2 a.m. scrolling through my phone, promising myself I'll have a productive day tomorrow.
Exactly. We are all Zeno. We are all full of good intentions and bad follow-through. We are all constantly constructing these narratives to explain to ourselves why we aren't quite who we want to be yet.
So, if we step back, what is the big takeaway here from this whole incredible life? Is it just don't give up?
Don't give up is part of it. I mean, the man wrote his masterpiece at 60. That's hugely inspiring for anyone who feels like they've missed their chance. But I think the deeper lesson is about what you called the accidental masterpiece.
What do you mean by that?
Svevo thought his life was a series of failures. He failed as a writer, which forced him to become a banker. The bank was a dead end, so he accidentally married into the paint business. The paint business was a distraction from his art, but it forced him to learn English.
Which led him to Joyce.
Who then told him his failures were actually successes. Every single one of those wrong turns was a necessary step on the path.
That's like a puzzle. You can't see the picture until the last piece fits.
Yeah, exactly. If he had succeeded at 20, he would have written mediocre traditional novels and we would have never heard of him. He needed the failure. He needed the drudgery of the bank. He needed the silence to gestate and become the real Italo Svevo.
And he needed the last cigarette as his lifelong theme.
He needed the struggle. The struggle was the art, the tension between the man he was and the man he wanted to be. That's where the genius came from.
That's a beautiful way to think about it. Which brings me to a final thought for our listeners. Zeno Cossini believed he could constantly restart his life by quitting smoking. In our modern age of self-optimization, New Year's resolutions, life hacks, the new year, new me mentality, I wonder if we aren't all a bit like Zeno. Are we addicted to the actual change, or are we just addicted to the exhilarating feeling of deciding to start over without ever having to do the hard work?
A provocative question. Are we just smoking one cigarette after another just to enjoy the thrill of putting it out? It's something to think about.
Indeed it is. So, find your own ultimate cigarette a moment, but maybe actually quit this time. Thank you all for listening to this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you in the next one.